Hello, everyone. This has been a long and very intense day, and now here we are with the last panel with three amazing speakers who will be talking to us about life and hope. My name is Ayşegül Altınay. By the way, I've been teaching at Sabancı University in Istanbul since 2001. I've also worked on memory and gender and have been involved in the foundation as a volunteer since the beginning. So in her opening remarks this morning, Mariana Hirsch invited us to reflect on and discuss how we might mobilize the archives not only of violence and catastrophe, but also of resistance, protest, and hope for the future, and how we could reclaim memories of hope and change rather than memories of violence and catastrophe. And I think this panel is going to do precisely that, focusing on life, hope, and the possibility of another future. Just as the Hrant Dink Foundation has been doing since its inception, building on Hrant Dink's very powerful legacy of mobilizing memory for hope, for life, for community, and for another future. The first conversations for creating a site of memory, a site of conscience, began soon after Hrant Dink's violent death. As I said this morning, the District 6 Museum was one of the earliest inspirations for this site. And here we are, 10 years later, with all of you as part of an impressive global community of memory activists and practitioners, and with the 23.5 Hrant Dink Site of Memory about to open its doors. So you can read about what happened in these 10 years, especially in the last few years, in this amazing little book that you can grab outside. I really think the Hrant Dink Foundation has done an amazing job of weaving the experiences and wisdom of you all in designing this site and documenting this process of weaving. Numerous people have contributed to this process, but one person has been a crucial facilitator, leader, researcher, and enabler, and that's Nayat Karaköse. I would really like to thank her on behalf of all of us. Yeah, maybe this is the moment to do that. Nayat's global survey of inspiring memory sites and museums from different corners of the world has not only helped shape the making of 23.5 Hrant Dink Site of Memory, but has also created many opportunities like this conference for the public exchange of experiences and ideas in this very dynamic field. And thanks to the Hrant Dink Foundation's panels and conferences and workshops in the past few years, as memory researchers, practitioners, educators, and activists based in Turkey, we have had privileged access to an amazing repertoire of memory sites and struggles that I'm sure will shape memory theorizing and practice in the years to come. So we begin this panel with a presentation on the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience. And 23.5 is the first site from Turkey to become a member of the coalition. Still the only site, but we very much hope that many more members will follow, as obviously there's a lot of need for this kind of memory work here, and I know that there's a lot of work that is being done on the ground. So I'll begin by introducing Linda Norris, who is the Global Networks Program Director at the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience. She leads the coalition's programmatic work in Asia, Africa, Russia, Latin America and the Caribbean, Europe, North America, as well as the Middle East and North Africa. I don't know what is left. Antarctica, maybe. Yeah. Helping to build the capacity of these members through trainings and workshops, cross-regional exchanges, and advocacy campaigns. She's the co-author of Creativity in Museum Practice and has written blogs at the Uncatalogued Museum. Her previous experience includes working as director of the Upstate History Alliance and the Delaware County Historical Association, where her innovative community-based work won state and national awards. She also contributed to projects that involved cultural heritage, creativity, and museum practice in Ukraine and Latvia. And more recently, Linda Norris has been doing consulting work with museums and cultural organizations in North America. Alongside her work at the coalition, she will also serve as an adjunct instructor in the Johns Hopkins University's online museum studies program, teaching international experiments in community engagement. And her talk today is titled Living Sites of Conscience. Thank you for being with us today.
Okay, I'm so glad to be here. Again, I got to present at Hrant Dink a year or so ago, and I am so excited to come back and to be with all of you. I'm not a formal presenter, and I often use a presentation as a way to kind of try and work out what I'm thinking about, rather than to report on what I did. And that's what this presentation is. There were some issues I'd been pondering, and when NIAT asked me to speak, it provided an opportunity. First, I want to talk a little bit about the coalition, just so you know who we are. We are over 250 members in 65 countries, but I should say as of yesterday, we're now 66 countries. We're happy to have our first member from Guinea, who just joined us. It's so exciting to have so many coalition members here to hear from, so I particularly need to shout out District 6, one of our founding members, the Apartheid Museum, the Tol Slang from Cambodia, the Kigali Genocide Memorial, the War Childhood Museum, Her Stories from Sri Lanka, and Act for the Disappeared. It's so exciting to have all of them to share their work. My job is to try and help them, our members, do the best work. I have a big fancy title, but my job is to really find ways for our members to connect with each other and to do the best work they can. So Hrant Dink is our first member in Turkey, and we hope not the last. And we also hope others of you who are interested in their work, please find time to talk to me about, more about what we do and membership if you're interested. To become a member of the coalition, we do ask, though, that there are 4 principles, kind of 4 pillars of our work that all of our members think about. One, that they interpret history through sight, but over the coalition's 20 years, this year we're 20 years old, we've moved out of our teen years and now we're 20. Our definition of sight has changed over the 20 years. We started as you really had to be about a place, District 6, the Statue of Liberty, Terezín in the Czech Republic, right? But now sight has lots of different meanings for us. Sometimes it's about a whole country, Act for the Disappeared, who you'll hear about tomorrow. Sometimes it's a place that you don't even have access to. Our members in Yemen and Syria, for instance, are not in Yemen and Syria. Sometimes it's actually an idea around memory work that may lead to a site. So that idea about site has become much more open. We had a conversation with a potential member this week who wanted us to think about women's bodies as sites of conscience. And we were like, we'd never thought of that, but sure. So interpret history through site. Engage the public in programs that stimulate dialogue on pressing issues. We believe in dialogue. Share opportunities for public involvement and positive action on the issues raised at the site. So we really we're about the past and we're about memory, but we're really about the future. And about how, our 4th pillar, how we can promote a justice and universal cultures of human rights for everyone. So those are our 4 basic pillars that all of our 250 members work towards. And so that's kind of very briefly. As a coalition, we connect members through regional meetings, through cross-regional work. We provide project support grants. We do joint projects ranging from a digital map of sites of detention and torture in the Middle East and North Africa region to a national dialogue on immigration in the US. And we also have one program that specifically focuses on transitional justice in immediate post-conflict countries, Colombia, Sri Lanka, other places like that at the moment. So we do a lot. We're a very small staff based in New York, and we do a lot of different things. But my talk here is inspired by this photo that I took last year when I visited. Should be familiar to anyone who's ever been there. It was on the wall, and it's photos of Hrant Dink and his staff at Argos at work, in their workplace. And it really made me think, and as I talked, about the idea that places of trauma are not the only places where the work of sites of conscience can exist, right? And so what I thought I'd do today is to try and explore a little bit about are members who are specifically workplaces and domestic places, homes, building a little bit on Charles's talk, I think. And then what we might do if we thought about sites of conscience in an even broader context. So this is what got me started. So among our workplaces are La Bois du Casier in Belgium, which is an industrial site. It was a mine. And it was the site of a really significant mining industrial accident in the 1950s. Most of the victims were Italian immigrant workers who had come to Belgium for work. And so in some ways, this place is about work, but it also has become a place to discuss issues of immigration and migration, particularly economic migration. That's why those Italians came to Belgium, the same reason other people now come to Europe. And so this site has an opportunity through its own history to engage in a broader European conversation about migration and economic opportunity. A different kind of economic opportunity is the Lowell National Historic Park in the United States, in Lowell, Massachusetts. Lowell was the home of vast textile mills, as one of the first planned communities for economic reasons in the US. But it also really tells a story about women, about gender and work and opportunity. So those conversations about fair pay, about women and gender, all those kinds of things take place in this National Historic Park as well. One of my favorite and hardest to get to, one of our members, I've been here and I can tell you it's hard to get to, is the Tea Plantation Workers Museum in Sri Lanka, which is high up on a tea plantation. The view you see is right outside the museum's front door. And the Tea Plantation Museum tells a quite incredible story of a forced migration from India to Sri Lanka of workers to pick tea, and the subsequent loss of any civil rights, their work to be accepted into society. And it's really a museum about a quite specific community that has a global story to tell. That involves colonization, and many other things, as well as about work and about community and identity. So it still continues to be a place where it really matters. This is the Clayton Temple, again in the US, and this is a place that actually started as a church, but I kind of included it as a workplace. This was the headquarters for the sanitation workers' strike during the civil rights movement in Memphis. And so these I Am a Man placards that are, that are familiar, if you know civil rights images at all, came out of using this particular church as a place to demonstrate and to plan the sanitation workers' strike. And so I think that their new vision is both to restore the site as a place, but also to use it to a place that looks at economic issues in Memphis today and really respects working people. So they've continued the kind of legacy of the site by moving it forward. But then there are homes, right? And we don't think about homes very often as sites of conscience. This is a new exhibition at the Tenement Museum, and I should say the Tenement Museum is our parent in a way. Ruth Abram, the director of the Tenement Museum, founded us by sending faxes in the old days, when you sent faxes, to about 50 museums around the world, asking them if they were interested in social justice and human rights. And a small group of people, including District 6, responded and founded it. But this new exhibition at the Tenement Museum really looks at contemporary immigration issues today, which, as you all know, are a pretty significant topic. But this is another one of our members, the Single Mothers Association of Kenya, who is on the Ziwani estate in Nairobi, which was one of the first planned British colonial estates. They are working now to provide economic opportunity, particularly for young people on the site, but also to think about how to use the site's heritage. So the estate itself has become a site of conscience. Here's a house that for many people in the U.S. is a place and a person they idolized for a long time. This is Thomas Jefferson's Monticello, and as one of our founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson is right. We think of him as an American hero, but there has been, over the past decades, a pretty considerable rethinking of his legacy, because Jefferson was not only one of our founding fathers, also a slave owner who had a decades-long relationship and bore 5 or 6 children with a woman he owned. Just this year, Monticello has opened a new exhibition about Sally Hemings, and you can see a part of that exhibition in the photo. I think one of the interesting things about some domestic places of sites of conscience is that they can be places particularly to bring women's voices who are marginalized forward. Even when, in fact, there are no portraits of Sally, a fair amount is known about her from her descendants. This has also required a decades-long process of working with descendants of the Hemings family and descendants of other descendants of Jefferson who are totally opposed to the recognition of that side of the family. So the fact that this has happened at Monticello is actually an incredibly significant way of rethinking a particular house. Another rethinking of a house is Maison d'Esclaves in Senegal. It's Africa's first World Heritage Site on Gorée Island. We're working on a project right now with the Senegalese government to rethink the interpretation of this house, but also to bring forward, again, the voices of women. This house was owned by a seigneur, as were many houses at that time, a mixed race woman, right, who held considerable power and also enslaved other Africans. It's a really complicated story, but part of our goal in the reinterpretation of this domestic space is to bring in the seigneur story, but also the story of the 75% of the people on Gorée Island at one point who were enslaved women. So again, a chance to bring these stories forward. But then we really do want to think about memory to action. And so what people do with that knowledge about the past is really interesting. This is a photo from the Harriet Beecher Stowe Center in the United States. Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin about slavery. It used to be when you visited here, you would get that really boring house tour where people tell you about the furniture. So boring. But now, in fact, you get to come in and you sit down on a regular tour, every tour, in her front parlor, and you get a chance to look at anti and pro-slavery materials from the 1850s when she wrote the book and have a conversation. But that conversation really opens up to issues today. And to have conversations with other people on a group tour who are different from you and have different beliefs is a really important thing. Well, Anne-Marie already showed this photo. So the Church, Our Lord in the Attic, one of our members does a great tolerance program that Anne-Marie talked about, so I won't. Pearl S. Buck House. Pearl S. Buck is the Nobel Prize-winning author of The Good Earth. And spent a lifetime thinking about multiculturalism and diversity and accepting difference as an author. And so these takeaway cards at the end of a new exhibition, they're specific actions, and you can be a convener or a contributor, that there are specific things you can do. But then I thought about, what if we thought about everywhere as a site of conscience? And I was really inspired here by the Stolpersteine, which I assume are familiar to many of you. Because when I see them, when I come across them in Europe, they make a place seem really real to me, an everyday place, no matter where I am. So then I thought about, well, what about if I thought about the mall as a site of conscience? Right? There's a lot of things to think about at the mall, right? Where the clothes come from, what capitalism means, what this has meant to the small communities in upstate New York where I live. All those things that are great sites of conscience conversations live at the mall. What about a dairy farm near me? What about that if it was a site of conscience? right? These workers are all from Guatemala. They have come to the US for economic opportunity. They have fled a civil war. Some of them are undocumented. Many of them are afraid to leave their farms because they'll be picked up. And layered on top of all those conversations, also about food supply and everything else, are the fact that this farm sits on land, of course, as all of the United States does, that was once indigenous people's land. So even at this one place, there's lots of conversations. And what about my high school gym, right? When my sister swam on the swim team in high school, she swam on a boys' swim team because there was no girls' swim team. So high school gyms, you can think about gender, you can think about the Me Too movement, you can think about everything. So I came away thinking, as I worked on this talk, that in fact, maybe our job is to think about that all the places that we are every day are sites of conscience. So I'm going to end with this one, one of my favorite pictures of Nayat. Because this was taken in Beirut at our Middle East and North Africa meeting this fall. And it's really because I think our work at its heart is doing exactly what Nayat and Farida are doing right here, which is listening to each other and to people who are different from us. Thanks.